All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Paquita Jarman-Smith from the State Education Resource Center. I'm here to welcome you all to our two-day virtual summit of strategies for schools. And today's breakout is going to be about multi-tiered systems of support, a school district approach to prevention and intervention. Before I introduce our presenters, I want to share a little bit of logistical information for you. We have a hashtag CT Prevention, if you want to use your social media to shout out something that you're interested in sharing with your social networks. There's a link that we want to be sure that you give us feedback on this summit and its impact on you in your work. And we have a link that I put in the chat that goes directly to the handout. So it's wonderful that we have our presenters' handouts for this session. We are going to mute everyone and save time at the end of the presentation for questions. If questions come up for you along the way, please feel free to put those in the chat. Did I forget anything? Okay, so our presenters today are Kelly Perales, the co-director of Midwest PBIS Network, and Mackenzie Harrington-Bacote, Bacote, Office of School Wellness, Laconia School District. So let's welcome them. And we will stop sharing our screen so that Kelly can load hers.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I think, again, I'm seeing that many of you already joined us for the keynote this morning, so thank you for that. I am going to really just set the stage here so that Mackenzie can share the story of what has happened in the Laconia School District. I know that it is really great when you can connect some of the big picture concepts that we talked about this morning already with a real example from a school district. And so I will help monitor the chat as well throughout the time when Mackenzie is sharing the example. And as it was said, we will take some time at the end to respond to some questions. And so again, here is our public health multi-tiered system of support diagram that tells us that regardless of if we are talking about academics, social, emotional, behavioral, mental health, or substance use and abuse, we can use this logic of what are we going to do for all students across all settings, including family and staff, in order to focus on prevention, early identification, and intervention. And then we are going to link and layer on a continuum of evidence-based interventions based on our data, both for the targeted or secondary tier 2 and for intensive individual interventions. And again, just to remind everyone, the research and the literature is telling us that using a multi-tiered system of support is essential in order to have accurate, durable, and scalable implementation. It represents a way in which we can focus on prevention and that continuum of evidence-based practices based on data. And we are more efficiently going to be able to support students we've identified with need if we apply the logic of a multi-tiered system of support. And so again, whether you're talking about social emotional learning, the impact of trauma and the use of trauma-informed practices, or for the purpose of our time today, addressing the opioid crisis in schools, using that enhanced multi-tiered system of support allows us to have a single system of delivery where our teams can be expanded to include partners from mental health and substance abuse, data that is expanded not only within our schools to look at additional data points, but also bringing in community data. That formal process to select evidence-based practices that match the data and the indicated need. The use of comprehensive universal screening for identifying the both internalizing and externalizing needs of students. Progress monitoring for both the system fidelity and impact, as well as intervention fidelity and impact. And all of this is to be done with ongoing professional development, technical assistance, and coaching, both from district and community leadership partners. And so what I want to do is allow Mackenzie to describe how they put these ideas into practice. And again, I'm going to help monitor chat, so feel free to type questions in, and then we'll take time at the end to answer them. All right, Mackenzie, I stopped sharing, so you should be able to do so now.
Okay. Get this to work. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Mackenzie Harrington-Bacote. I am in the Laconia School District in New Hampshire. Been here for 7 years, and prior to that, I was at the New Hampshire Department of Education here and our state as an educational consultant, and did a lot of that big picture work around PBIS and multi-tiered systems of support. And when I came to the Laconia School District in the 2013-2014 school year, I did so because we had entered into a partnership, the Department of Education, through a large federal grant from SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and 3 different districts in the state, really looking at how can we shift the needle in our schools using a multi-tiered system and looking at all of these different areas of trauma, of substance misuse, etc. And so this is just a quick snapshot of my district. They had never done PBIS before, never really looked at tier 2, tier 3 work beyond what we already do through 504s and IEPs. Our data was really, really high at this time. Some things have continued to go up that are really kind of out of our control, like our homeless population at this point is about 6%. Free and reduced lunch, we're still mid-high poverty school district. But either way, when I came into this district, they were in such a reactive and crisis mode sort of process, they couldn't really get to academics. And so we already knew we needed to change the way we did business. And we took that entire school year to bring in community partners, to bring in key people from all of our schools and the district, and really look at what do we need? So where do we want to be? So how do we get there? We did an environmental scan, this massive environmental scan of our community to really figure out what do we already have and kind of crosswalk those to determine the difference. And that really helped inform a lot of the ways that we moved forward with our multi-tiered systems of support. So we knew from this year-long process and really before that we had a lot of community risk factors. I would imagine these are very similar to the risk factors that you yourselves experience in your districts. Poverty, homelessness, foster grandparents continues to rise for us every year. We have a very significant transient population here in our city with a lot of the local surrounding cities. So we have a lot of families that come and go depending on the season. If they're homeless, are they in a shelter here in Laconia? Are they living in a campground in a neighboring area? Our opioid use at that time, we had more overdoses per capita than any other state except West Virginia, and Laconia had the highest overdoses per capita in our state. We still hover in that area. We kind of teeter between the top 5, somewhere in there, which is not something we're proud of. So we knew that we had a lot of risk factors, but what we also know, just intrinsically and through a lot of research that we did and a lot of education that we provided to our community and to our parents, is that adult substance misusers and abusers are 2.7 times more likely to be abusive towards their children and 4.2 times more likely to be neglectful. Children of alcoholics have a 4-fold increased risk of being dependent on alcohol themselves, and that it becomes a cyclical process for many. The National Coalition for Homelessness published a study in 2009 where they showed that 38% of the homeless population were alcoholics and 26% were drug abusers, showing that there is this cyclical relationship between them. So we knew here in our city that we had a lot of that, but we knew this area in particular really was a ripple effect risk factor for us. These are just some quick statistics. We spent, and still do every year, spend a lot of time looking at data, school-based data as well as community-based data. We pull community partners together every month, including the police department, which is where we get most of this information, and really look at our city as a whole and how we can be better supporting them, knowing that schools have become hubs for providing many things for families far outside of academics. And so this is just a quick snapshot of the number of Narcan administrations, the doses used per administration, really, that's how that breaks down, overdoses, and then fatal overdoses. And what we know right now is that our overdoses are going in the right direction. We have 8 fatal overdoses from last year in comparison to 12 the year before. But what we also know that's not captured here is that in our community, other drugs have been on the rise, such as methamphetamines. We started looking at the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. If you don't do this now in your school district, I would highly recommend it. We had never done it in this district until the 2015 year. It comes out of the CDC, but it filters through different departments in every state and how that rolls out to the school districts. It's a tool. It is not a reflection of your school, it's a reflection of your community. And so we really spent a lot of time educating people around that so that they understood that the data that we're looking at is community data. So the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, it's an anonymous survey conducted in your high schools with every high school student who's willing to participate. And that's how they get this data. And it essentially looks at a lot of different behavioral areas, risk areas. Here are some of those areas. It looks at behaviors that lead to unintentional injuries and violence, alcohol use, tobacco use, physical activity, sleep activity, sexual activity, dating violence, drugs. And we use this data here in our district, and many other places do as well, not just for our information, but our community partners access this data from us as well to help inform the ways in which we look to fund different things, the programs we want to bring in. What are we prioritizing in our buildings and in our community? How are we working with our community partners? We use it to raise awareness. Sometimes there is an area of need that we weren't fully aware of. So we also use it to gauge perceptions in the community. It's over 100 questions that are asked every year. I've just simply pulled some from that very first time that we did this. And I have compared here, LHS is our high school here, Laconia High School, versus the New Hampshire. And every single category on here, we had higher response rates than the entire state. And some of these were really concerning to us. So when we look at heroin use, it's concerning to us that 3% of our students are claiming that they have used heroin. It just was not the direction that we were looking to go in. We had never had substance misuse prevention, intervention, and treatment on site in our buildings with the exception of the DARE program prior to this. At this time, we also knew that the way we wanted to do our work as we move forward was really taking a holistic approach. And by holistic, I mean really looking at the whole child. Some of you have heard that terminology before. We really wanted to take a look at not just what are the dimensions of wellness that we know are important, but why are they important? So we know that when a person is emotionally well, that they have a positive attitude, optimistic, there's self-esteem, self-respect, a balance between emotional states, ability to participate in positive interpersonal relationships. We know that social wellness matters, but why? Why does it matter? So when we look at these reasons, we know that when you're socially well, which is a very different dimension than emotional wellness, that you can be assertive, that you have a balance between your social and personal time, you exhibit self-confidence, ability to participate in interpositive relationships, and to work in a team. When you're personally well, these are the areas that we're looking to see: a sense of right and wrong, ability to explain beliefs, and to exhibit empathy. And empathy happens to be something that through our PBIS work, we work on in all of our buildings. Most importantly, why does environmental wellness matter? When a school is environmentally well, and as you read through these, you might realize this is exactly what PBIS is. A school exhibits shared norms, values, and expectations, develops a culture of respect. There are positive relationships experienced between students, families, teachers, teacher to teacher, teacher to student, administration to teachers. and we have a shared commitment to the operations of the school and the care of our physical environment. So for us, we knew that this was exactly the reason that we wanted to focus on MTSS and PBIS, because we wanted to really hone in that environmental wellness where we felt like we really could shift the needle in a way that mattered the most. So we invested in this work about 7 years ago, and we still work on it to this day. It is always a work in progress. It is never over. I think of it in the way that we think about academics. There's never a question every year, are we doing professional development on literacy and reading and math? Yes, of course we are. This is just like that. We're always doing professional development on behavioral health interventions and prevention. And what we did in New Hampshire is over time, in our partnership with other districts and our New Hampshire Department of Education and a couple of other universities here within the state, we sort of coined our own term, multi-tiered systems of support for behavioral health and wellness. And really that is anchored in the PBIS framework, which we know is evidence-based. It's that multi-tiered framework. And then what we did is that we just started to infuse our framework. We took what's called the Interconnected Systems Framework, which Kelly can absolutely speak more about, which really is that school-based mental health partnership with your community mental health partnership. We blended that model and started to infuse it with social and emotional learning, Interconnected Systems Framework, which is mental health in schools, Student Assistance Program, which is our way in which we operate within our substance misuse prevention and intervention work, and I'll talk more about that, trauma-sensitive schools, and the pyramid model, which is essentially PBIS at the preschool level. We did this, and I put this on here for one reason and one reason only. A lot of the work that we are doing, because we are a mid-high poverty school district, we did not have the financial ability to do these things. So my job really is to leverage any external funding source that makes sense for us. Not looking at any and all opportunities, but really just the ones that make sense for us. So if we come across a funding opportunity that spells out that they're looking for grantees to implement what we are personally looking to be implementing, those are the ones that we apply for and that we try to leverage. And we've been really successful here in the district with that. And this is just a cycle of many of the federal and state grants that we've had an opportunity to be a part of, and that we're still a part of some of these towards the end. Currently, we are part of Project Prevent with the U.S. Department of Education and Project Safe Schools with the U.S. Department of Justice. And we take this funding and we leverage it to essentially bring in the staffing that we need to implement a multi-tiered systems of support with all of those different areas infused in it that I showed you a minute ago. And so none of this existed 7 years ago. And now my office has me. We have 5 full-time social workers that are spread out across our buildings who work that one-on-one piece with families. We have 2 part-time master's level mental health clinicians, a full-time LADAC who also does the student assistance program for us, so that prevention end. Originally, that position was a contracted position that we brought in from a community partner. And after about a year or two, we realized that we really needed her full-time in our buildings. So we moved around some stuff and we made that change to an employee. We have a part-time training and marketing coordinator, which will make sense when you think about all of the professional development that you really want to do with your district. A part-time families and transition coordinator, previously known as our homeless liaison. We have a nutrition or a health and wellness educator. Our newest venture, which I'm really excited about, and I won't touch on it too much today because we're really in the middle of developing it and implementing it for this coming school year, is a restorative justice program for our middle school and our high school, really looking at that violence prevention and victimization piece of our work, which substance misuse goes hand in hand with a lot. And then looking to increase our school psychologists within our district to help us with the tier 2 and tier 3 portions of MTSS. So I know you know a lot about PBIS and what that looks like in your school. This is simply the way that we use that framework to anchor substance use supports in there. We use our tier 1 teams and our tier 1 work in all of our buildings to look at what prevention education makes the most sense for elementary school, for middle school, for high school. And we spent time really digging into this, and there are a lot of options out there. I'm going to share with you today the options that we have selected. Most of my slides will have the link embedded at the bottom, so if you want to find more information about that, you can. For us, we chose Boven's Life Skills for our elementary schools and Project Success for our middle school and high school. And then we do a lot of other prevention education beyond just those immediate ones. At that tier 2 level, we're doing group counseling and small group prevention education through different tier 2 groups. And then tier 3 is individualized counseling and therapy for students. We also take our multi-tiered systems of support framework and we overlay that with families and communities. And this is how we do that here. For us, that universal piece with families is really working on parent education. So how are we raising awareness among parents? How are we helping to educate them? And then that tier 2, how are we helping hook up parents that we know need group supports, whether it's foster parents raising grandchildren because their daughter is struggling with opioid use and is possibly incarcerated, whatever that looks like. Also working really closely to ensure that everything we do is really transparent with our families. So pulling them in for consent or pulling in the guardians for consent for their student to access a tier 2 group. And then the parents, our social workers, our LADAC, mental health clinicians, they meet individually with our families and with our parents. And ultimately we work to hook them up with any tier 3 supports that they may need themselves in the community, which ultimately trickles down to helping their student. So I'm going to start really diving into what are the specific things we do at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. I had already mentioned Boven's life skills. I just wanted to bring this up so you can see kind of a visual of what it looks like. The link is there on the bottom if you'd like to look that up. Again, there are many different options you can pick. We do this in addition to our DARE program, which the police department still implements here. For us, we've tweaked this program over the years to really fit our needs. I've talked to other districts in the country who've done the same thing. They use this program, but they take it and they make it their own a little bit. So when you look into some of this, you might see the need to do that as well. We use Project Success for our middle school and our high school. And the way we have taken Project Success, and again, the link is in the bottom corner here, so you can find a lot more information after the fact about it. It is a SAMHSA approved model where it really goes through an 8-week prevention education, different 8-week sessions. And we took this work, and instead of having it as a totally separate program, we took the time one summer to embed it in our health curriculum at our middle school and our high school levels. And we did it in a way that the health teachers are teaching Project Success, but we push in the LADAC for a variety of those different sessions to also teach them different information, to get her face known to new students in the district, freshmen if they've come in and weren't in our middle school before, things like that. We also use mindfulness as a universal intervention. We also use it for tier 2, but we also use it for all kids in our elementary school. And we personally chose Mindful Schools, again, the link is right there, as the way in which we wanted to get our staff certified. And we were selective in who we chose. Most all of our social workers, some of our counselors, LADAC, they're all certified through Mindful Schools, and they use it to implement mindfulness. We do yoga in some of our classes in partnership with this. Our elementary schools have taken the Mind Up curriculum and paired that with what they've learned in Mindful Schools. And we do it in a way where we're teaching brain science at the same time as part of our infusion of trauma-informed care, which goes hand in hand with that holistic prevention approach. And well, it sounds a little funny, but it goes really far. We take Play-Doh and we build Play-Doh with our kids. They build Play-Doh models of the brain and we teach them about the amygdala. What does that mean? What does that look like? What does danger feel like? And we use that as we're teaching them mindfulness to help them understand what mindfulness does for the brain. We use zones of regulation across our elementary schools. One elementary school in particular uses it as just a massive universal basis and foundation for the work in their building. And this zones of regulation, it's not an evidence-based intervention, but it's based on evidence. And I say that because it's important to know that difference. At the middle school and the high school, we take a little more of an organic approach. We really rely on youth voice and youth choice. Oops, didn't mean to skip ahead. Youth voice and youth choice, if you will. And we really rely on them to talk to us about what do they know? I mean, peer support goes a really long way, especially in our high school. And so we have this youth-led club, if you will, called Stand Up Sachems that developed at our high school. Sachems is our mascot. It is now at our middle school as well. And they work with what is called Stand Up Laconia, which is our grassroots drug-free community organization. Some of you may have drug-free community zone grants. That's kind of where that idea came from. And they really work hand in hand with them to look at how can we do a better job of supporting our friends and our buildings. So they sponsor fun and sober events, dances, games. We have this whole after prom event that happens that's all sober and goes on all night. They lead parent nights. They raise awareness on an ongoing basis with messaging on school walls, social media, not just around why you shouldn't do drugs, because that doesn't get you very far sometimes, but all the other things that go hand in hand with that, such as dating violence, building healthy relationships, suicide, wellness. We also take the time to do a lot of messaging with our community and with our parents. And this is just an example. We have an electronic newsletter that goes out in our city. And so it's not just the school district, but everyone in the city. So it's like pretty big. It goes out pretty continuously. And this is just an example of one of the things that we put out there occasionally to help parents think about what are the ways to help reduce the chance that my child will drink or use drugs. Really simple stuff. We try to keep our messaging for parents in the community really simple, not a lot of words, always being mindful that not everyone has the reading comprehension level of a teacher. So we're always trying to be mindful of that. Another form of organic communication and raising awareness that is one of my favorites is the way we educate our teachers on what to look for. As vaping has come on the scene the last few years, and I know many of you would agree with this, it was so rapid, caught everyone very much off guard, and it was changing all the time. So the assistant principal at the high school, this is a slide from one of their faculty meetings that I snagged from him, where these are just items that he had confiscated from kids that week. And he just took a picture of it. You can see he used his hand here to write on the screen to help start educating teachers. This is what you're looking for. This goes a long way for us in our buildings and trying to really wrap our heads around not just what the national data or information says, but what's happening here in our community and what should we be looking for. So now I'm going to head into tier 2. Our licensed alcohol and drug counselor, she happens to be a duly certified mental health clinician, so it's a big bang for your buck. She provides newcomers group, children of alcoholics, Alateen, grief and loss. And this is part of Project Success. So these are some of the groups that they would recommend you implement. And she does this at the middle school and at the high school. One of our school psychologists as a tier 2 intervention does strong kids. And again, this is evidence-based. It's a SEL curriculum. And then she does coping cats, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for anxious children. And then this coming year, we haven't done this in the past yet. She just got certified in this. We will be implementing CBITS in our middle school and in our high school as well, which is another tier 2 intervention. Through our infusion of trauma-informed work, we looked to something that we found at a conference, a trauma-informed schools conference a couple years ago now, called Neurologic. And we use this really across the district. Our counselors and our social workers spent quite a bit of time taking this curriculum and making it fit for what they were looking for and what the needs were in their building. What I would say to some of this too is that the needs change every year. So our tier 2 groups are not always the same. It's really based on the need of our population. So not every school is implementing neurologic all the time. It really depends on if it comes up. But the brain breaks, and I've put a picture of the book up here, it's a great thing that our counselors use, especially at the elementary level when kids are just needing a way to just pause and breathe. And it just gives different really easy activities. Again, the link is on the bottom here. Our social workers and our school counselors across the district also provide tier 2 interventions. Grief and loss has unfortunately been one we've consistently provided in our buildings. And not to get into too many stories, but some of the reasons are directly because of fatal overdoses. One of our elementary schools a couple of years ago had a grief group for 4 fourth graders. Just that one year, they all lost a family member to a fatal overdose in that year. And some of these things are happening to our kids in a way that they are physically there when it happens, or they're asleep upstairs when it happens. And so the ripple effect from that is really long-term and lasts throughout the years that they're with us. So it really depends on the year. But again, these are some of the ones that our social workers do. Coping CAT, like the school psychologists, they work on social skills, controlling emotions. I'm sure you've heard of Chico as part of PBIS. We have what I would consider Chico on steroids at our middle school. It is so popular. Kids who don't even need it want it. So we just go with it. It's just a great way to build relationships and make those connections. At that tier 3 level, it's really prescribed what we do. And this is where you have your individual LADAC counseling, so the licensed alcohol and drug counselor. And federal law protects kids 12 and up. And this is one of those odd times where we actually don't seek parent permission because we don't legally need it. And in fact, often kids who need drug and alcohol counseling won't seek the counseling that they need because they don't want their parents to know. Federal law protects them and gives you a way to do that without parental consent. So for many of our students, we are helping them on site. And again, we don't need parent consent. Mental health counseling, we have an ongoing contract with our mental health center here, where we have a clinician that comes into our middle school and a clinician that comes into the high school. They have an office on site here. They see kids one-to-one. This has helped us to break down the barriers for many of our families who can't access that outside of school, whether it's a lack of transportation, maybe mom is working 3 jobs and physically can't get the child there. This is a way that we can provide that service on site very seamlessly so that they're receiving that. And then our social workers have a huge caseload of tier 2 and tier 3 kids that they work with, especially our McKenzie-Vento population. They work really closely with them. They will take them to different community places to either help them do paperwork, get them signed up for something that they need, or doing that referral process to get them there. We use high fidelity wraparound. We spent the time to get all of our social workers trained in high fidelity wraparound. And we did this through a grant that we had a few years ago that's just now ending called System of Care. And I tell you that for a few reasons. We leverage these grants to essentially help us build the system and to build a sustainability plan so that when that funding ends, we have it built in a way that it will go on, whether through different funding or through a community partner that can provide it at no cost to us. Like our mental health clinicians, that is all billed through private insurance or Medicaid. We don't have to pay for that. And so the upfront cost to us in building that partnership doesn't cost you money now because it's free. Wraparound is essentially an individualized wraparound services, strength-based, focused on natural supports, community and team-based, and really relies on cultural competence to implement for families in need. We no longer provide this on site in our buildings, but we refer out to a state-led organization who does this work for us now. We use Renew. It is a structured school to career transition planning and wraparound process. It was developed at UNH here in New Hampshire a couple decades ago at this point now. Renew stands for Rehabilitation for Empowerment, Natural Supports, Education and Work. And we have a variety of staff who we have certified in this, social workers, behavior support specialists. We even have a few paraprofessionals at the high school. We make this decision case by case on who we get trained. And then we work to have that internal capacity to maintain that. So we have someone internally in the district who isn't just a Renew facilitator, but they oversee all of our Renew facilitators. This started out as a high school tier 3 intervention, and now we use it, we've pushed it down into the middle school. And we've been working with UNH the last couple of years to really tweak that to see how can we use it to help those 8th graders who are transitioning to high school who are already struggling. And we've seen a lot of success with that. And I just want to show you again, you can find the links right here to that if you want any more information about it. Renew, as an example, they do a lot of training at the national PBIS conferences, so you can always find that pretty much annually.
And we do have Renew here in Connecticut as well.
Awesome.
Through CERC.
Awesome. Yep.
Love it.
Yeah, me too. I'm really love it. So this is just a couple of really simple ways that we sort of overnight adjusted to remote learning. When we all got thrown into remote learning in March, for us, our immediate worry was, oh my gosh, our tier 2 and tier 3 kids, we're not going to have eyes on them. And we were so worried about so many of our families and how are our kids going to keep getting these services that they so rely on. Our LADAC sees so many kids every day. How is she going to keep seeing them? So the first thing that we did is we procured cell phones for all of them. It sounds really simple, but it goes so far. And I don't know if it's the same in Connecticut, but for us, we have a lot of families who won't respond to emails or phone calls, but they will respond to a text. So our social workers do a lot of texting with our families. We moved to the DoxyMe telehealth portal. I've included the link down here. It's used by a lot of places. It's not the only one by any means, but we've had a lot of success with DoxyMe. Our mental health center did the same thing. They're using DoxyMe to continue having that telehealth portal, that visual option. And our home visits, we rely so heavily on home visits for the families we're really worried about. So we sort of changed up our model a little bit, and we started calling them physical distancing home visits, where they would go to the home and they would never go in the home. It's almost like you knock on the door and then you back up 6 feet. That was really what was happening, because we needed to either drop off materials and supplies for some of our families. In addition to our normal food service program, we have another program. It's based off of, I'm not going to remember the name off the top of my head, but it's the idea that kids are also not eating over the weekend. So how can you ensure that they have meals over the weekend? So we would take bags of food to the families that we used to give bags of food to on Friday, and really just to get eyes on them, just to see how is it going. I think, unfortunately, we all know that a lot of the struggles that families were experiencing are significantly more now since remote learning began. While ironically, on paper, it doesn't look that way. DCYF here in our state, their numbers have dropped by about 50%, the number of intake calls and things like that. But that is simply because the school district is an example of a place that has eyes on kids, and we're mandated reporters. So when that's not happening, we really worry, what is the spiral down looking like in that household, where we know domestic violence was already an issue, where we know drugs are already in that household, and now kids are home all day. So we tried somehow to keep having that happen with our home visits. One of the ways that we've done a lot of this work is we do what's called a facilitated referral process. So if we have a child who we know needs mental health supports and we want them to start seeing a mental health clinician, we don't just say, you know, hey mom, we're referring your child to our mental health center. We actually will call mom or the guardian or the grandparent, whoever is raising that child, and ideally have them come in and meet with the social worker or the school counselor and the mental health clinician as well, and do this sort of really warm handoff. And we call that a facilitated process. We do that for many reasons. We found that it removes a lot of the barriers, it removes a lot of the stigma, and it really empowers parents in their role in that process. So I just want to point that out, that we use that process. Another way that we've really tried to wrap our hands around helping our parents is by making sure that they know what's in the community. So maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we spent an entire year developing with all of our community partners a community resource map. And I've got the link here. It lives on my website. You can go and find it. And what happens, and we made it very visual. In my community, we have a lot of parents who have very low reading level comprehension. So we made it very visual. And when your mouse hovers over any of these icons, the words will pop up to tell you what it is, right? And then you click on it. And when you click on a box, so this here is our substance misuse support page. And this is just the top part. This actually goes on for pages. When you click on it, it takes you to all of the resources, not just in our city, but any surrounding city or community that they're more than likely accessing, whether they live near there, or maybe they have something that we don't have that they need. And we try to put in as much information as we can. And this is a really comprehensive resource map that we've developed. It takes a lot of time to continually update it, but we do it because it's important. Our social workers use this with parents all the time when they're meeting with them. They not only show them where it is, but they'll often just print it off for them and give them hard copies. And so if mom needs help with housing, if they need help with food, if they are looking for any sort of social services, the social worker will sit them down and pull it from the resource map and print it off for them and make sure that they have that when they leave their office. Our current big endeavor with our community, again, and this all launched from our MTSS work because we worked so hard to bring our community into that. We've developed what's called ACER, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences Response Team. We did not coin this term. Manchester, New Hampshire was the first city to develop this a couple of years ago, and we have really replicated their model and tweaked it. Their model doesn't include the school district in the same way, but it is a partnership between our police department, our family resource center, and the school district. And essentially, the goal of this is the police department, they're constantly in homes. They're always taking calls, whether it's domestic violence, drug overdose, what have you. We've spent the time and invested the money to have all of our police officers trained in trauma-informed care and neuroscience and how the brain reacts when it has been traumatized. And we developed a release that the police officer will talk to parents when they're doing all of their paperwork, whether it's a domestic violence event or an opioid event. And they really sent them down and say, hey, listen, we'd really like to pass your information on to our Family Resource Center. They have so many supports and services for you. They talk them through it. And the district is a part of that release form. And if a mom or a dad or a guardian sign that release form, what happens is the police department then notifies the Family Resource Center. If one of the children is school-aged or if all of them are school-aged, the Family Resource Center then notifies us. And they basically let the exact social worker, I'm always included in that, know, hey, by the way, Johnny was at home last night, dad OD'd, is in the hospital. And the reason this is really relevant and important for school districts, oftentimes we don't know this information until well after the fact. And what happens is Johnny comes to school and he's off the charts. He's behaviorally just, we don't know what's happening and he just kind of blows up. And then that leads to disciplinary infractions. But if we knew at the beginning of that day, or as soon as we could get that information, hey, there's something really serious going on in Johnny's life, it allows our social worker and or our counselor or whoever the person who has the best relationship with that child to catch them at the beginning of the day and say, hey, Johnny, can I talk to you? And wrap around them from the very beginning. And what we're finding from this work is that it's helping to minimize those behavioral infractions. It's helping to sort of stop that ripple effect in its tracks, if you will. So right now we have, I think it's about 10 families who completed the referral form and signed off and that we're all working with. And of those 10 families, it's over 30 kids involved in these families, and there's over 100 referrals that have taken place. And there's a case manager, essentially, an ACER facilitator, if you will, from our Family Resource Center who hooks up with that family and becomes almost like their case manager. So this is our newest sort of endeavor that we're really excited about. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong button. There we go. The other piece I just need to touch on is we have spent the last 7 years investing really heavily in professional development. And if you're here right now on this call with us, you're doing the same thing. You understand, and Connecticut understands how valuable this is. The more you can train your internal staff and increase their skill set, the more sustainable all of this work is. So over the years, depending on whether we have new staff coming in or if it's a new, like restorative justice for us is a new thing we're really working on, these are the variety of conferences that we go to. Some of them I go to every year because they're just that good, like the School Mental Health Conference, the National PBIS Conference. Some of these are just worth it every year. We also utilize on-site or what I call local professional development, whether we're having people come on-site into our district and provide this information, or we take people like myself and I go and spend a week and become a certified instructor. So youth mental health first aid, we have a variety of trainers, including myself. I'm a certified diversity and cultural competence trainer, so I can provide those trainings every summer to our staff. Swiss facilitation, I don't know if you use Swiss in your districts. We've worked, okay, I'm seeing a nod. I'm the facilitator for 3 of our schools. I have 2 other people that do the other ones. Just investing internally is the way we have found the biggest bang for your buck. Taking some of these big picture ideas like trauma-informed care down to the nitty-gritty. So trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive school classroom strategies. We have people come on site and help us with that individually. And just quickly, some of our impacts to date. So as of right now, some of our data sort of looks the same every year because it's something that we need and we're doing it. So annually, right now for the past 5 years, we have no less than 40 middle school and high school kids who access our licensed alcohol and drug counselor on site for individual ongoing counseling and treatment. Students self-refer to the LADAC, and when that switch sort of started to happen a few years ago, that was huge for us. That means that she's become such a fabric in the counseling department of those schools that kids don't even need us to know what's going on. They'll just go refer themselves. They refer their friends. 20% of all of our kids in the district receive Tier 2 supports and services. Every year we have no less than 25 students accessing individual mental health counseling on site in our buildings. Our office discipline referrals have dropped by over 50% across our district through our implementation of MTSS. And we eliminated in-school suspension at the high school. Every year, all of our 4th graders receive Boven's life skills. All middle school and high schoolers receive Project Success. We embedded it, as I said earlier, in our health curriculum. Because of our social workers in every building. We are able to refer our students and families to community supports. We conduct home visits. We do prevention messaging, and we implement ACER. I'm just going to quickly show you some of our data for a few reasons. One, I think database decision-making is the only way to operate in this business, especially with a multi-tiered system of support. A lot of times we think we know anecdotally what's going on, but we really don't. What I also want to show here, what we call this our spider graph, the blue line or the bottom line on each of these, and these are our schools, that is reflecting our office discipline referrals by 100 kids. So it's based on that. What you want to see as you implement PBIS or MTSS to fidelity, you should see that top line, that tan or that beige line going up. So fidelity measures are going up. What you should see as those lines go up is that your behaviors are going down. If you really are hitting fidelity, they should be going down, right? So this is our data over time. You can see our elementary schools are still trucking along, doing a nice job. But this is why data is important. Then you look down at the middle school. What happened here? What happened in the 17, 17, 18 year? Why did those start crossing? Because that shouldn't be happening. Well, for us, we know anecdotally, we had a complete turnover in middle school administration. So we knew that, so we expected some hiccups there. High school, but we haven't in high school in the same way. But so why are we seeing some issues here? We didn't have full turnover, but we had a couple positions that changed in the administration there. But why are we seeing these numbers going up? So we take a look at that and then we say, okay, we have to look a little deeper. This is what I love about Swiss, because you can look at all of these things so much deeply. When we specifically pull suspensions involving alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, and this is again by 100 students, you can see that we're still pretty zero at our elementary schools, but all of a sudden in that same year, we see an uptick. For us, as we went and pulled every single one of those and looked at them individually, what we were finding is that that's when vaping was really exploding in our buildings. So for us, we installed vape detectors in all of our bathrooms, which I'm still on the fence about, so I'm not recommending that. We're still figuring out the kinks, but we tried it. But so it's important to look at your data. For us, when we started this work, we weren't doing home visits. We didn't have school-based mental health supports. And so now as we've moved towards our target of 20% of students receiving school-based mental health supports and family engagement, we've hit our marks. And so I'm not even showing you the last couple of years of our data because it kind of flat lines, which you expect to see, which is a good thing because we're still doing it. And then what we continue to look at is that YRBS data. So in the beginning, I showed you our 2015 data, and now we have 3 years of data to compare. And so what's helpful about this is that you can see the areas where you're trending in the direction that you want to be trending in. So ecstasy as an example, that's a good trend. We want to be going down. But then you look at other ones and you say, well, that is not the direction we want to be going in. So the very bottom one, the number of students who report using electronic vape products, we have doubled since the 2017 year. That is not the direction we want to be moving in. What that says to us is that we have to continue with our efforts, ramp them up. For us, really looking at universal ways we can increase our prevention messaging in our education. And then you can see some of the other ones. This asterisk, by the way, your state has the ability to strip out certain questions that they don't deem important that year and or add questions. Unfortunately for us, our State Department stripped out this question, so we don't have data for that year to look at. But again, some of them are going in the right direction, some of them are not. And so it's really important that you're always looking at your data. The last thing that I'm going to leave you with here, with all of this said and done, policy really is what drives a lot of this work. And so we are now looking at policy that we can implement sort of at that very top level that informs how our process or our protocols or procedures are implemented. And so we're really looking at a district policy on drug and alcohol education and abuse. And abuse really ties into that disciplinary part. So for us, as an example, which we already do, it's not in policy, but it's in practice, which are very different things. When a student is suspended for drinking on campus, bringing drugs on campus, we have a way in which we say, you know what, when you come back to school, you have to automatically see the late act for 6 weeks, no questions asked. It's a requirement of your reentry into school. What we also do for some students, depending on the repetitiveness of those infractions, is we start to really work with that family and say, you know what, Johnny needs more than 6 weeks. if Johnny and if parents sign off on it, meets with the LADAC for 12 weeks, for 18 weeks, for the duration of the semester or the school year, we'll reduce the suspension days. Instead of 10, it'll be 6, 7, whatever. I'm making that last part up. But we're really trying to think about it a little differently and take moments that used to be very punitive and sort of pause and say, how can we make this an educational moment? So instead of, and my timer is going off to let me know time to open up for questions. But anyway, so I want to encourage you to think about a policy and to think about how you can use your multi-tiered system of support and leverage that to offset exclusionary discipline practices. And I will stop there and open for questions.
Mackenzie, the only question that came up in chat is, yep. Kathy is asking, how many semesters of health do students receive in middle and high school?
That's a great question. It's 1 semester. And the project success that we embedded, it's an 8-week. So it's 8 weeks of that semester has project success embedded in it. It's a good question. And I don't know if other people have questions. If questions come up after the fact, my contact information is here. I know Kelly's put her contact information up. We're more happy to email, phone call, anything to support you guys as you move forward. Nikita, would you like me to stop sharing my screen?
Sure, thank you.
So I see a question, who coordinates this K-12? Let me see if I can open this up. School counseling and support staff are dominated. That is a really great question. So, and you're spot on with that. Same thing with school psychologists. They are dominated with doing evaluations. That takes up all of their time. So for us, we've leveraged a lot of the different grants. And then we honestly just sustain after the grants end. We move around our IDEA money. We move around our Title I, our Title IV-A. We move that money around and shift it to support in the ways that we want to. So I coordinate at the district level. And then within the buildings, we have very specific people who facilitate Tier 3 and who facilitate Tier 2 and Tier 1. And we invest heavily in their professional development so that they learn the skills to be that person on that team. Sometimes it is a counselor, oftentimes it's not. Sometimes it's an administrator, oftentimes it's not though. We have behavior support specialists, social workers, even one of our special ed directors, she does coordinate one of those teams. But it depends on your building. It really is case by case and looking at the skill set of your staff. We have certain teachers who are so invested in this work, they lead all of our universal teams and they lead the youth-led groups so that our universal teams aren't just the voice of teachers, it's the voice of the kids as well. But you do need other people to coordinate it. Counselors really are out straight. I would agree with that. Any other questions? Thank you for the nice compliment, Lori. Don't you love the Zoom awkward silences these days? Bill, I see your comment about investment and understanding. It took a long time. I'll also throw that in there. In my first year in this district, the majority of my time was spent building relationships with administration in the buildings, building relationships with school counselors. It took a lot of time. It's also about the right fit. So sometimes you think you need 4 people, you might just need 1. It's about the person and their ability to do that.
I would also like to add, folks, if you are interested in local support, you can reach out to CERC for some of your needs. We're hoping to get funding ourselves for next year to make it possible for more schools to participate in what we're doing with the 2 districts that are already involved in the prevention project. So please feel free to reach out to us and let us know. It isn't based on your your demographic needs or your financial affluence or anything like that. So the support that we're offering through the grant is for all schools.
I just want
to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mackenzie.
Go ahead.
I saw, Bill, your comments in the chat, and thank you for your participation. You know, grants are wonderful because they help us to learn, they help us to test things out, and they are not sufficient for helping us build capacity and sustainability. And so that's when it really comes down to having leadership, both at the district and with those community partners who can get behind the why, right? What is our vision, our mission? What are our goals and objectives? And why should this be a priority? And, you know, again, it seems if ever there were a time to prioritize all of the non-academic aspects in education, it is certainly now. And so you just have to help those leaders see what's in it for them. What is the value added? And so again, you know, if you need more talking points, reach out to CERC, let us know. And Mackenzie, what were you going to say?
I was just sent a couple of private messages here, so I want to make a clarification. When I'm talking about suspending students for drug infractions, the majority of the time that is for selling drugs on campus. We have more of that than we would like, and so it's that fine line of protecting students and staff. Some of the items in the photo that I showed, the organic communication, if you will, the vials of THC oil are so potent that they are fatal if exposed in any type of way to a student who doesn't know what it is. And so it is really those serious infractions that we're having to look towards that. We're moving into restorative justice. We are creating this program that was supposed to kick off last year, but we ended up in remote. So it's kicking off this year where we're really looking to do restorative programming with students instead of suspending, if you will. So it's almost like suspended, but not. It's more like you're put into this program. So I just want to make that clarification because that was asked here on the side. And then there was one other, and how do we work with our local drug prevention coalition? That's a great question. So for years I sat on their executive committee. We met almost every week. We have them come to many of our meetings. They sit on my community management teams that I lead in the district. So we really work hand in hand with them. We have them come to our parent nights, our open houses. Last year, at the beginning of the year, in our elementary open houses, they're called Stand Up Laconia, our grassroots coalition, drug prevention coalition. They sat at a table right when you walk in the door, and they were giving free lock boxes to families with information as to why they should use them. And so we partner with them in a lot of ways. They also work really closely with our high school and middle school, our youth groups that we have, our youth clubs. They actually come in and meet with them pretty frequently, and they plan together. They plan prevention events together. So it's not just the high school students, but also they have the backing of Stand Up Laconia. Oftentimes I've contracted with them over the years so that I can help support their work through the grants that we have. But that's a great question. It really is important to decide or to figure out, do you have them and how can you leverage that partnership?
Well, once again, we'd like to thank Mackenzie and Kelly for this overview of what it would look like in a school. It's so interesting and encouraging to see how your work is making progress and of benefit to your students. So this was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paquita. Thank you,
Stay
Kelly.
well.
Enjoy the rest of your time.
Take care, everybody.
Just a reminder, please fill out our evaluation and check out those resources that are in the chat. You can copy it or just click on that link right now so you can get the downloaded handouts.